Let's come to the PHP data types. PHP is a loosely typed programming language. What do you mean by the loosely typed programming language? Now, there are two types of programming language. Some programming languages are strongly typed, some like PHP are loosely typed. Now, strongly typed programming languages require us to declare the data types of variables, right, before we execute any scripts. Okay. Now, static or strong type refers to data types that do not change after they have been declared. So we declare the variables um, before we use that particular variable in our programs. Right? For example, C is a strongly typed programming language. But in a loosely typed programming language, we do not require to declare the data types of variable. Dynamic or loose type refers to the data types that can be changed after they have been declared. Right? So we can assign different values later on. Right? So PHP is a loosely typed programming language. Um, so data type is the specific category of information that variables can contain. So different categories and different types of variables can contain different types of data, right? That's what we mean by the data types. Now data types that can be assigned only a single value are called primitive types, right? So what are the data types usually we can find? We can have integer data like positive or negative numbers with no decimal places. We can have floating point numbers, that means positive or negative numbers with decimal places or expressed in exponential notation, or boolean values, that means logical values, true or false values, right? Or we can have strings with means a sequence of characters, or we can have null values like empty values. Okay. So when it comes to numeric type of data, PHP supports two numeric data types, integer and the floating point number. Right, integers are the positive or negative whole numbers with no decimal points. Right. Floating point numbers is a numbers that contain decimal places, so that is written in exponential notation like this, right? So exponential notation or scientific notation is a short way of writing very large number or a number with the many decimal places. So we can use this, okay, this kind of notation style. Boolean type uh, data, um, we use true or false values because we sometimes we need to use it in our programs to test some values, right? Whether it is true or false, or the output is true or false, etc., etc. So it decides which part of the program should be executed and which part should compare the data. So we use the Boolean type of data. Now string data types, we use if you want a sequence of characters. It is created directly by placing the series of characters between double or single quotes, right? Okay, so we know how to use now quotes, right, correctly. So PHP language also support another type of data called a resource type data type. This is a special variable that holds a reference to an external resources. For example, it can be resources like a database or XML file. So these are called a resource type, resource data type. Or we can have reference or composite data types, right, which contains multiple values or complex types of information. For example, we can have two reference data types like arrays or objects, etc., etc. So we'll come to that later on. So let's come to the PHP arrays. An array contains a set of data represented by the single variable name. If I want to represent this list of data, so I can declare an array something like this, right? These are the array data, and this is the array name, right? Now uh, dollar sign and square brackets. So square bracket means a array. Okay, so this is a conceptual example of an array, right? So these are the Canadian provinces. Okay, so I want to hold Canadian provinces in an array called provinces. Okay, so let's see how we're going to declare initializing indexed arrays. Now an element in an array refers to each piece of data that is stored within an array, right? So by default it starts with the number 0, the 0 element, right? And then the first element, second, third, so on and so forth. So index is an element's numeric position, whether it is 0 or first place or second place or etc. Reference by enclosing its index in brackets at the end of the array name, right? Whether it is a 0 place or the first place or the second place, right? Now this is how we creating an array, right? So we can just write up the array name with a dollar value, dollar sign equals array, and then list the values, right? Now remember, if we have strings, we need to use double quotes and, and separate with a comma to indicate the second one, right? So this is how we declare an array called provinces. Okay. Um, so in PHP, array elements can be different data types. So element we can have numeric, so we can have integer values, we can have string values, etc., etc. So then I can access, how can we access the elements in an array, right? So for example, here I am echoing back the elements in an array. In the first echo, I use a paragraph, and inside I am accessing or echoing the second element of, remember the first element is 0, the second element is 1, uh, and here I'm echoing the fifth element, right? And we can use the count function with an array to find out the total number of elements in an array. Sometimes we need to do that to find out how many elements in an array, right? Now here I declare two arrays, one with provinces, one with territories, right? Now here I am echoing back um, using a count function. So count, I specify the first array name, and second one I'm specify the second array name, right? So in this case, first one will have 10, and second one have actually 1, 2, 3, right? So that's the output. If I want to if I want to find out the index and the value of each element, I can actually use print r function, right? Print r function. So it will actually return the information about the variable, right? So it is actually print r mostly useful when we use the arrays, print the index and the value of each element. For example, if I use print r in the um, first array, um, the first array, so we will get an output something like that. The first element, this, and the second element, this, third element, this, etc., etc. So I can actually sometimes modify the array elements or change the array element. So how can we do that? For example, if I have an array, um, hospital departments, right? So if I want to change the first element to something else, so I can write, okay, I can actually assign the new value to the first element, right? So this is the array name, uh, this is the element number, first element, so I'm assigning a new value, so I can do that. So then it will override this one. That's about arrays.